Reporter Nick Farabaugh. I'm John Luciew, and we are in uncharted territory in Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin, your 19-year head coach with a Super Bowl ring on his finger, has submitted his resignation to the Rooneys, and he is stepping away as coach. As for what he does next, we don't know. We do know, according to reports, that the Steelers retain his rights on a 2-year contract that paid him a total of $50 million. So it's possible, and we'll talk to Nick about this, the Steelers could have some say over to where he goes and could get some compensation if he does want to go to another team down the road. But the immediate future is an off season for the Steelers that we haven't seen in nearly 2 decades. They're going to be choosing a coach. They don't do a lot of those. I mean, they've had Chuck Noll, they've had Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin since 1969. So this is a historic move by an historic franchise to find their next leader in today's NFL, where you're seeing a lot of these offensive gurus go in, young guys, and make a big impact and put their teams in playoff contention. So let's go to Nick in terms of how unexpected this was. Obviously, we had that huge deflating defeat last night on Monday Night Football against the Texans. The Steelers couldn't score a touchdown. The defense got rolled over by the likes of Woody Marks and Christian Kirk. Then we have Tomlin resigning, not being let go, not him resigning on his own will, where last night he didn't even want to address what he called the bigger picture. And less than 24 hours later, really almost like 12 hours later, here we have this resignation. So it seemed to happen quite fast, even though in his statement, Tomlin talks about giving it lots of thought. How much thought? How long has he been thinking about this?
Listen, these have been whispers all season. The moment you knew that the whispers were legit was when Jay Glazer started talking about him.
Mm-hmm.
That is Mike Tomlin's best friend in sports media. He would tell you everything you needed to know about Mike Tomlin. If Mike Tomlin wanted a message out, it was going through Jay Glazer, you know? And so once that started to pop up, you knew there was something there. I think that this has come up before in other years. I think that, Mike Tomlin this year, he was a little bit different when you kind of look back on it. He wasn't as cathartic. I'd say he at times was jaded. I would say that's a good word to describe Mike. I think he just got tired of the grind of the same old, same old. Listen, fans get tired of it too, right? It wore on Mike. I truly believe that. It wore on Mike. And when you just keep doing the same thing over and over again and you keep trying different things and it just keeps getting thrown back in your face, you need a year off. And I think that's what Mike needs. Mike needs a year to step away from football, go do TV, go tour the buildings of all these different franchises, do something like how Mike Vrabel did, right? Where he was an advisor here. He learned inside these multiple buildings, and he just came back with a refreshed mind, a refreshed perspective, a different type of mentality. He was a hard ball coach in Tennessee that got the most out of his players, but now he has more of an edge to him that is more in the modern sense. The schematics are more modern. The dynamics are more modern. And so you see that. Mike T needs the same thing to happen to him. And so I think Mike T's been thinking about this for a while. He won't admit that he thinks big picture during the season, but Mike thinks big picture. It popped up. But to Mike's credit, he never really gave it any credence, right? I think that is to his credit. He never let it become a distraction with his football team. But he is now gone. And this is not that surprising, with kind of the whispers that have been murmuring throughout the NFL over the last few months. I knew it was a possibility. Did I necessarily think it was 100% going to happen? Probably not. But, I do think that it is not a stunning surprise that this is it for Mike Tomlin. But I did know they weren't going to fire him. If he was going to leave, it was going to be on his own volition, and that is exactly what happened.
Right. And let's address that because, obviously there's going to be a lot of speculation surrounding this and how it happened and what happened behind the scenes. We already have a comment in the chat saying he was told to do this to save face. Really, he, with $50 million under contract, I would make, if I didn't want to leave, I'd make the Steelers fire me. You know what I mean? And then also, the Steelers having some semblance of a say because he resigned instead of was let go by the team. So they retained the reports I'm hearing. Nick, can you confirm this? That the Steelers will retain his rights. So if he wanted to get back into a head coaching position, what would have to happen? Let's explain that process.
So the same thing that happened with Sean Payton would have to happen. He was traded. Remember, Sean Payton was traded from the Saints to the Broncos. The Broncos gave up draft picks to get Sean Payton, and that's what would happen with Mike Tomlin. More likely than not, he would come out of retirement for one specific team that he's bullseyed, and the Steelers would let him talk to those teams, but the Steelers would then say, in order to get him, you have to trade for him. And so that, I think, is the key thing. So the Steelers potentially, probably not this year. I wouldn't imagine he steps away and then tries to get another coaching job. It's possible, but I'm not necessarily thinking that's going to be what's happening. I think he'll take a year off. And what will happen is if he wants to come back in 2027 and says, hey, I want the Buccaneers job, for example, that's what he would want, right? Then he can go there. But the Steelers have to say, okay, we're going to trade your rights to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a draft pick. And so the Steelers potentially could actually have draft picks waiting for them on the other side of this, where they have the rights for Mike Tomlin still. It's exactly how that Sean Payton situation played out. I expect that to be the way this plays out. And so the Steelers will not only get, when Mike Tomlin comes back, not only have right of first refusal, essentially, but they will have the ability to trade him for draft compensation, which is exactly how the Sean Payton situation played out and is likely what this would also entail.
So, in short, this could not be better for the Steelers. The way this scenario has played out, obviously, Mike Tomlin thinks it's going to be good for him because you've looked at him through the season. He does look a little haggard. He does look a little tired. He looks like he's aged. He looks like he probably could, take a little better care of himself. That kind of thing. I think obviously Tomlin is doing this for himself, perhaps for his career, perhaps for his family, perhaps to maybe join Jay Glazer at Fox for a year and have some fun on the air. And do that kind of thing. And maybe like Cowher, he finds that he likes that lifestyle better and he stays out long term. But if he wants to get back into coaching, the Steelers potentially are going to reap draft picks. So this breakup could not have happened better for the Steelers, but only if they get a good coach. Art Rooney II is the guy that's going to pick the next coach. The last three, actually, Cowher, Noel, and Tomlin were picked by Dan Rooney, and he had a pretty good track record. Art Rooney, who has gotten his share of criticism for the postseason failures of the last decade, that he ain't his old man. His old man knew football. He ain't his old man, and there's been rumblings about him. So he's on the bubble to really pick the next guy. And you talked about Tomlin needing to refresh his attitude toward the game. You do see a lot of these young guru schematic guys, and you got AI coming down the pike, and you got all this analytics that's there now that you determine whether you go for it here or go for it there. And how are the Steelers going to try to navigate the current sort of coaching zeitgeist of what's winning in the NFL versus the tried and true that they might try to lean back on?
Well, the Steelers, and you mentioned Noel Cowher and Tomlin, all three of those guys, young assistants that were up and ascending. Mm-hmm. So the retread hire, the older coach that isn't necessarily been around, that feels unlikely. You remember the last time they went through this, everyone thought it was going to be Ken Wisenhunt or
Right.
Russ Grimm, right? That was the big thing. And then all of a sudden, Mike Tomlin gets interviewed by Dan Rooney. They fall in love with this 34-year-old guy. I mean, I don't think people realize how crazy it was for the Pittsburgh Steelers to hire Mike Tomlin when they hired him. He was a first-year defensive coordinator, 34 years old, on a team that went 6-10. What's not like that Vikings team was good. That Vikings team, by all statistics, defensively, was some of them bottom of the half in the league. And then Mike Tomlin reaches the mountaintop 2 years later, reinvigorates a team that needed a new voice. You know, obviously Bill Cowher stepped away for different reasons, but he stepped away. Mike Tomlin comes in and immediately they ascend to the Super Bowl. 2 Super Bowls in a row back to back that they appeared in, winning one of them. So that to me is just something that you look at and you say, hey, this is kind of the type of thing that the Steelers can do when they do that. So I look at it and I think coming up and ascending talents in the coaching realm, what's the new age voice look like? And there's a different way that the new age voices look. You know, they have to still have discipline. They still have to have authority. That's not really foreign to a lot of top coaches. You think about D'Amico Ryans, for example, yesterday. He's a defensive-minded head coach, but he is the new age type of defensive head coach. D'Amico Ryans is a very Steelers coach, isn't he? When you really think about it, tough, disciplined football team that plays good defense. They don't even do anything crazy schematically. They just line up and play better than you. But they are disciplined. They don't bust coverages. They're well coached. They're well coordinated, and he hires good assistants. So if you're going to hire a defensive assistant, and that, I mean, I think everyone that knows the Steelers probably should expect them to hire a defensive coach. I understand there's an appetite for an offensive mind. It doesn't really fit the Steelers. It's probably going to be a defensive-minded head coach. And there's most of the cycle, and the thing about this year is, you know, all the good offensive coaches were kind of last year. You think about, you know, the Ben Johnsons of the world, the Liam Cohens.
Right.
Those guys were last year. This year, the cream of the crop is mostly on the defensive side of the ball. You think about, you know, Jesse Minter. You think about Chris Shula. You think about Brian Flores. You think about these names, and those are the top names this year. So it's very defensive slanted. And so the way the Steelers have to look at it is, how do you have that new age identity? It doesn't necessarily have to be completely leaning into – you don't have to be Dan Campbell and go for it on 4th down every time, right? But you got to be a well-disciplined team, a well-coached team, someone that brings the edge that a guy like Mike Tomlin did when he was young. Young Mike Tomlin was a dude that coached guys that were in some cases either the same age or sometimes even older than him. But he wasn't a pushover, right? He came in and still was a very disciplined coach. When you look at those teams back then, this guy was really kind of leading the troops in a way that was impressive for someone 34 years old. And to me, Bill Cowher did the same thing. But I'm interested to see where the Steelers go in this respect, because I'm expecting a younger coach that has that DNA to him. That Steelers DNA. When you kind of think about Steelers DNA, you think about that tough-minded, grittiness, defensive-minded head coach. Those are all things. But in the modern NFL, I think you look at it and say, what's the trending meta? But how does that guy continue to evolve? Does that guy continue to evolve with the times? And I mean, we can see the branches of, you know, McVay's tree and Shanahan's tree. They're everywhere all over the NFL, right? But there's only a few of them that continue to evolve and get better outside of McVay and Shanahan themselves. You know, guys like Kevin O'Connell and guys like, you know, Mike McDonald, right? Like, that's not even a part of their branch, but he's kind of the meta type from the Ravens. So there's a way the Steelers can navigate this with the defensive head coach and still end up with a really strong staff that also incorporates everything that we talked about here for the Steelers. But we'll see how they navigate this.
Right. And you are so right. The Steelers definitely have a type. I do expect this coach to be in his 30s. I think 40s might be a little too old. You know, I think they like the young guy. They don't want. There's a comment here that Tomlin was more of a friend than a head coach to the players. Not really. He still had the authority, but he knew how to communicate with players. And there was that time when, he was so young that he was right. He was right there with some of the veterans in terms of age, and it made. But he always seemed to have somewhat of a separation between coach and player, because I do think that's important with a younger coach. Hey, I want to catch up on a couple of comments because there was a good question. When we were talking about the Steelers retaining the rights to Tomlin, we noted that he had 2 years remaining on his contract. So the comment was, well, if he waits 2 years or longer to get back in the coaching, do the Steelers you lose their rights?
Yeah, I saw that. So they don't, because the contract doesn't toll. So
Right.
it doesn't. The years do not expire.
Right.
He still will have 2 years because they will not toll because he's not coaching. So even if he decided, okay, he took 2 years off and wanted to come back at 28, Steelers would still hold his rights.
Right. And that, so in other words, because he's not fulfilling those 2 years, those 2 years stay written in stone. The comment you made about the Texans is so true. I was at the game last night thinking that the Texans are the team that Mike Tomlin wanted to build all these years, that he's been trying and missing, especially on defense. We've been trying and missing on defense. But as the one comment astutely points out, D'Amico has the benefit of all those losing seasons in Houston to build that kind of a roster, whereas Mike Tomlin's patented non-losing seasons never really put us in prime position for the elite players at the top of the draft. And some there's something to be said for a couple of 7 and 10 years or 6 and 11 years, and New England seems to be benefiting from having a few down years now. You know what I mean? There's something to be said for that.
Usually, Houston was very unique because you aren't wrong. They aren't wrong in the fact that 3 of their blue chippers came from those years. You think about Derek Stingley, Will Anderson, and CJ Stroud. Those are their 3 blue chippers that they took within that top 3 in the top 10. But there's also just a bunch of other pieces that they did really well. I mean, I think about guys like Kalen Bullock and Kamari Lassiter and, Daniil Hunter, and just guys, the way they acquired some of those guys, it was outside those top times. So you can, if the Steelers really what they need, in my opinion, the Steelers only need 1 year of down football because they need a quarterback. That's what they need, right? They have this litany of young pass rushers. I mean, Highsmith, Herbig, Sawyer with the strip sack last night. If they won last night, we'd be talking about how good Jack Sawyer's look this year, wouldn't we? The Steelers, on top of TJ Watt, have a litany of pass rushers. They have an offensive line. I know they struggled last night, but the offensive line, Faltonu, McCormick, and Frazier, 3 guys you really like. Dylan Cook might be starting to add his way into that. They have a kick-ass tight end in Darnell Washington. They have Jaylen Warren, who's still young enough to be a really good running back. They have pieces here. You know what I mean? Defensively, they have a good corner, good young corner in Joey Porter Jr.
Oh, he's been great.
They are pieces. Keanu Benton, Derek Harmon, Y.A. Black. Like, there are pieces littered across this roster that are young and have chances to be something. Are there needs? Sure. Guard, corner outside of Joey, safety, wide receiver, obviously going to be the big one, and quarterback is the big one. But you plop a quarterback into this environment with a competent offensive coaching staff, the Steelers can be an extremely quick turnaround. I don't think people realize how quick. The Steelers have 1 down year, they suck, and they get a Drake May. The Steelers all of a sudden are going to be the Patriots. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. And so the Steelers have young pieces here. They have a nucleus that they can build around. And so it's not barren. The cupboard is not barren. And that makes the Steelers' job attractive for a few reasons. The Steelers' job is going to be attractive because, in my opinion, one, you have incredible stability, right? You're going to have time in the Pittsburgh Steelers organization that you would not in other orgs. You're going to have time to set the table, set the chessboard, decide how you want to build this thing, decide how you're going to do, and you're going to get time to implement that vision. That's unique in this NFL. Usually it's knee-jerk. Usually you have to be good right away. Nowadays in the NFL, that's all about it. In the Steelers org, you're going to have stability. That's going to be one thing. So that's going to attract a lot of candidates to this job. Two, as I mentioned, it's a rich organization with historic tradition. That is a big time job in terms of the NFL. You think about the Bears last year. I know in recent years people laughed at the Chicago Bears, but they are a historic, rich organization. Ben Johnson was up for that, and they also had Caleb Williams. Now, the Steelers don't have the quarterback like the Ravens do, right? So if you're going to Baltimore, you get Lamar Jackson, get a two-time MVP, and I think that is extremely attractive to a lot of coaches. You go to the Titans, you get Cam Ward. You go to the Giants, you get Jackson Dart. Like, you have a young quarterback there. But you're going to have enough time in the Pittsburgh Steelers organization to set it up how you want. So you're going to be able to get that quarterback at some point. You're going to be able to attack that plan, and you're going to get the time to enact that vision. And so you're going to be able to, I think, attract some good candidates coming here to Pittsburgh. I don't know if there's a better job than Pittsburgh on the market right now. I think you can argue it's Baltimore and Pittsburgh as the top two jobs on the market right now, John. I guess it depends on what you value more. Do you value enacting your own vision more and getting the time to do that, or do you want to immediately be plopped in to playoff Super Bowl expectations with Lamar Jackson? I guess that's the way you do it. Those are the top two jobs, but the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have their ability to pick candidates, and some candidates are going to be pickier than others, but I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be able to convince some of those pickier candidates to potentially come to Pittsburgh as a result of some of the structure that's built here.
Yeah, and I think that addresses a couple of comments before that we're talking about. People aren't going to want the Steelers job. The Rooneys don't pay. Obviously, they pay. They were paying Mike Tomlin. He had a $50 million contract, so they were paying. Now, it is an argument about the assistant coaches and the assistant coaching staff that the Steelers were routinely having a smaller assistant coaching staff. But here's the jobs. Let's just go down the list. You had the Steelers, the Ravens, the Browns, the Giants, Titans, Falcons, Cardinals, Raiders, and Dolphins. Those are the jobs that are out searching for the coach. And I agree with you. I think it's the Steelers and Ravens, two different types of jobs. One has the quarterback, one has the immediate playoff pressures, and one doesn't. And one has what you said, stability, tradition, patience with the Rooney family. So, and certainly now Cowher came in and started winning right out of the gate. It took what Noel left him, and he when he came in, I was there. I witnessed. I was a young season ticket holder when he came in, and he literally lit a fire under the whole city. I mean, he was just he emoted on the sidelines and just. In the stands, you wanted to just run. I mean, it was pure aggression. It was pure Pittsburgh, chin out. Let's fight. You know what I mean? It was just an adrenaline rush going to those games. That was unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. Noel had tons. He had some. He had a 1-win season until they started getting the players assembled. To me, the most interesting thing about this new coach is how the new coach fits into the existing power structure with Rooney and Kahn and Andy Weidel when it comes to assembling the team. Because obviously Tomlin was the big gun on in that pecking order previously, but a first-year head coach, how does that change the power structure within the organization in terms of taking all those great pieces that you just listed and then adding to it and building it and finding our identity, like how the Texans have their identity and how they won that game last night, the identity that they want to win in today's NFL? How did they do that?
Well, I suppose, let's say they go outside of the structure that we've talked about, which is young up-and-coming assistant. Like, okay, let's say they hire Brian Flores. He's been around. He's been a head coach already. Flores is going to probably take an immediate impact on personnel. He's going to look at it and make his stamp right away. A young first-year head coach is going to want to try and do that, but they might be more limited to their side of the ball, right? So, okay, if they hire Chris Shula, for example, he's going to probably get a big stamp on the defensive personnel. But the offensive personnel, that might be more of Omar Khan and Andy Weidl's job.
Okay.
But I think Omar Khan and Andy Weidl step up into a bigger capacity here, more to the forefront in terms of how they're going to kind of draft the strategy of it and the long-term strategy. So they're going to work in tandem with that head coach. But I will say this. I think one of the great things about being a Steelers head coach is the control you do get. You don't have a meddling owner. Your owner doesn't come down like Jerry Jones and tell you what to do. You get to do your football job. And that's, I think, what Mike Tomlin loved about being a Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. You didn't get, told what to do by the owner every day of the week. You didn't get told to do this and that. And sometimes Art Rooney's hands-offness is sometimes his own detriment, right? Just through the stability of it. Now, he's around the facility all the time and constantly observing, but he's not telling Mike what to do. And I think, some people have said, why are they attractive? And, I tried to answer that. But kind of the way I would describe it is, from kind of the outside looking, you could say, that Rooney maybe doesn't open the pocketbook nearly enough, or the fans are riled up. One, I think passionate fan bases are very attractive to head coaches. I think that they love having fan bases like that because of the home field advantage it gives them. Pittsburgh is unique in that respect. When the fan base is on, it's really hard to win an Acrisure Stadium when there's a loud fan base there. Two, nothing matters more to these coaches than control. Control and stability to these coaches is king. Some might even prefer it to the quarterback. And I'm totally being serious about that. Ask any coach in the league that wants to be a head coach what he wants, and he wants control and power. The Pittsburgh Steelers will give that coach that, and he will have great stability and be able to enact his vision. That is rare in the NFL. You really don't have time generally to do that. In Pittsburgh, you will have time to do that. And that is what's going to make Pittsburgh a very attractive head coaching opening to a lot of these prospective candidates. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. I think they're going to cast a very wide net of options. I think they're going to fully embrace kind of weird names. I think you're going to see some odd names off the radar that maybe you don't expect connected to this job. Not that they are going to necessarily get the gig, but Art Rooney did sit in on the last coaching search. He was one of the guys that at least decided to hire Mike Tomlin. Dan Rooney was there, but Art at that time was very much getting ramped up to his position right now. He saw that. The Steelers only found Mike Tomlin because they cast a huge net. And so that's going to be something that they do because maybe right now they're looking at, I don't know, maybe they want Brian Flores right now. But then the Steelers interview some young I'll just throw a name out there. Grant Udinsky from Jacksonville. He's a Jaguars OC. He's 30 years old. That's all he is. But the Steelers might want to get him in here to see, is there gold there? Is there something there? Because I do think that is one thing that Art Rooney will not leave is any stone unturned. They are going to cast a wide array and a long list of interviews. We may not get the hire for the Steelers until, am I going to be stunned if this hire doesn't get done until February? I wouldn't be shocked.
No, I like that, and I really believe the template is set by previous precedent that it will be someone outside of the organization. It will be someone within the NFL, not college, and I think it will be someone in their 30s. And it probably, I agree with you, leans to the defensive side of the football, but he must demonstrate an ability to hire a staff that's going to complement any deficiencies he has on the offensive side. I would want to know the full plan in place of these candidates, of the staff that they would hire, what type of offense how they envision complementary football and how the offense would work, and how it would all feed into a winning program. I mean, because you hire somebody on the defensive side, like you said, give them more say over that, but also we need better coordinators. I mean,
yes,
we need better coordinators.
Listen, there is going to be a question of when it comes time to hire coordinators, what are you going to do? What's your plan to hire coordinators? Because this, in my opinion, we talk about Mike T a lot. This is his biggest kryptonite. When he was really good, he had good coordinators. Those Super Bowl teams, Bruce Arians, Dick LeBeau, when the Steelers were at their best, he had great coordinators. He just could never figure out how to crack that. How do you hire good coordinators? And this next coach has to really kind of look at that. Now, I think this, and especially if you're hiring a defensive head coach, nothing is more important. The argument, for hiring an offensive coach is offense is king. Quarterbacks are king nowadays in the NFL. It's easier to replace the DC that's great than the OC that's great if you're a defensive coach. And I think that's valid. I just think the Steelers are going to look to the defensive side of the football. So that defensive coach has to have a real eye for coordinator talent. I think of I know Todd Bowles is on thin ice in Tampa, but to his credit, the man doesn't really miss on OC hires. Dave Canales, Liam Cohn. It's been a really impressive list of OC hires he's made down there. And to me, the Steelers need to find somebody in that same vein. I'll just tell you the pairing I really like right now that I just look at that would make a lot of sense. Chris Shula, defensive coordinator for the LA Rams. You can pluck someone from McVay's tree right from there and get an OC. And there's a really hot OC candidate, maybe the hottest OC candidate on the entire market this offseason, Nathan Shieldhaas, who is currently the pass game coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. Can I sign you up for Shula Shieldhaas? I want Shieldhaas to be hired. I want Shieldhaas to be hired, if for nothing else, but to hear the Yinzer say, Shieldhaas. It's like the perfect Yinzer name. But Shula Shieldhaas makes a lot of sense.
Wow.
So you need to look at these kind of ideas. How are you going to hire these coaches? What is going to be your philosophy for doing so? What are you looking for? What's the identity you want to set? And so you got to vet these coaches in depth. But yeah, man, I mean, they're going to cast a very wide net. I don't even know, if I can. I tweeted out earlier, there were 4 candidates I thought that fit their ID kind of. I mentioned Jesse Minter, Chargers defensive coordinator. I mentioned Chris Shula. I keep mentioning Chris Shula because I think he makes a lot of sense for them. Mm-hmm. Yes, if you know that last name, he is the grandson of Don Shula. And then Brian Flores, I mentioned. And then the 4th name was an interesting name, and it's kind of a wild card. I don't really know if they'll be able to do it, but Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame's head coach, I think is a very Steelers-y coach. And then I know people mentioned Kurt Cignetti because he's doing an incredible job right now at Indiana. He's a Western PA kid. I guess he's not a kid. He's 64 years old.
Yeah.
But he is a Western PA guy.
I don't think either of those fit the template. First, they're from college with no NFL experience, and 64, I think, is too old. And Freeman, I think, fits the profile, except no NFL experience.
He's a college coach.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. I think Shula and Minter really fit into that. Flores is kind of this loophole that I'm not sure kind of how to make of it, because I think if they're going to go off the beaten path, he makes a lot of sense. He's not necessarily a young ascending assistant, but he is a hot name assistant right now. He was a head coach, and he's been in the building before. Art Rooney knows Brian Flores. He knows all about him. Again, Art is hands off, but he does observe, and he's always in the facility, and so he knows a lot about Brian Flores. And I will say this: I do think Rooney might even call up Mike at some point during the process and be like, "What do you think of this guy?" You know what I mean? I think that Art Rooney respects Mike Tomlin to that degree. And I remember last year there was a quote that Mike Tomlin said, "There is no coach that deserves a head coaching job more than does not have one right now than Brian Flores." And so if they're going to crack that trend, I think it would be for Flores. That's just my guess.
Interesting. Hey, now that we're talking about the big shakeup that's happening and we're talking about the power structure, I keep hearing rumors to the effect that Andy Weidel is being thought of for other positions outside, in other organizations. I'd hate to see us lose him at the same time we're searching for a head coach and preparing for the draft. This offseason, if this coaching position doesn't get filled to sometime in February, that doesn't give a lot of preparation and strategy going into the draft, where we have all these extra picks and we're looking for a quarterback, although the quarterback class is not looking that great in this particular draft. It looks
No, it's
like
not.
the 27 draft now is looks like it's going to be full of golden nuggets with golden arms. But anything on Weidl, the fact that he could be wooed away from the Steelers after coming over from the Eagles.
Well, he leads the scouting operation for the Steelers. Omar kind of handles the cap and the business and the speak side of things. So, he's the assistant GM as a result of that. But you kind of look at Andy Weidl, and he's going to be a hot name because in the last 2 or 3 years, the Steelers have had good drafts. I mean, look at the 23 draft now. How many guys out of that class are going to be legit players that they're going to want to extend? I mean, Benton, Porter, Washington, Herbig, like good draft. If you get 3 or 4 stars out of a draft, it's a good draft. 24, you got 3 offensive linemen. Sure, they've had some misses. Roman Wilson comes to mind. Maybe Broderick ends up in that bucket. But they've also had some really big hits. And so he's going to be a hot name. Is there a spot that I see that's 100% certain for him? No, I don't think that there's an obvious spot for him right now. But he could be a hot name. I'm just not sure that's going to come this offseason. When you see the GM openings, I'm not sure that there's a spot for Andy Weidl. Although I respect Andy Weidl, I think he's great and should be a future general manager, which will help the Steelers because I think having Omar Khan and Andy Weidl there for that new head coach to come in and lead on to start and not having to replace that entire operation will help. So I do think the Steelers are going to be in a good spot front office wise there. But I do think the question is going to be who is the next head coach because it's going to totally deviate where the plan goes. It's going to totally – what scheme does that coach want? What's the plan? What's his vision? So that will change everything about this offseason. I know we had come into it thinking, it's going to be a quarterback this year, but that class is thinned out and the Steelers have needs elsewhere. So we'll see. But I am interested to kind of see what the Steelers are going to do here at this hire because they have a chance to really reignite, I think, a fan base that has kind of, I don't want to say apathetic, but they've become certainly jaded and worn out over the last 8 to 10 years.
Well, I'm just seeing it from the comments here. I mean, some Steeler fans are so down on this franchise, they're waiting for a list of all the coaches that are going to turn the Steelers' job down. I mean, that tells you something right there. I mean, we're going to be out with our hat in a hand on the sidewalk begging for coaches to come to Pittsburgh. I mean, that's what it's sounding like from some of these fans. I mean, do you think we would ever hear of a coach who is offered this job and turns it down? I mean, I just can't imagine that happening.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like very hard pressed to find somebody. I really do. And when you think about the Steelers job in particular, we mentioned all the pluses. I understand, if there's a coach that gets the Steelers and the Ravens on the table and goes with the Ravens because you have Lamar, right? And Lamar is the golden goose of this coaching cycle just because how many times do you have an open job where you walk into it and you have a 2-time MVP quarterback? It's just rare. But if someone is offered this job, I think usually it's very hard to turn down, man. It is. And so I think they're going to be able to pick who they want. Not, contingent on like if they wanted to go the college route, like, okay, Marcus Freeman, getting him out of Notre Dame. I don't know about that. Those are bigger questions and they've never done that before. But it's something to think about when you look at that. But the Steelers, I think, are going to give the coach a lot of control, which is going to be very attractive to people.
Well, there you have it, Steelers fans. Your off season is merely hours old, and already it is a momentous one. A coaching search is underway now, a far-reaching one, turning over every rock apparently in the NFL. We know the template that the Steelers like. Guy in his 30s from outside the organization with NFL experience, probably lean on to the defensive side of the football. That is the model. We'll see if they will go beyond that and maybe entertain some college coaches like Freeman or a more tenured coach like Flores. We'll see. And, of course, we'll be discussing in future episodes on how this is going to cascade down the roster, veterans. Is this going to mean like a Cam Hayward might not come back next year. We'll see. He was very close to Tomlin. But right now, you just got to say, hey, 19 years, it wasn't perfect. It was a Super Bowl run, 193 wins, I think he racked up in the regular season. Tomlin did. And like you tweeted out, even with these last 7 playoff losses, you still got to think that was a good hire back when he was plucked from utter obscurity by the late, great Dan Rooney. So congratulations to Coach Tomlin. We wish you all the best, and we'll probably see you on Fox next season. So we'll look forward to that. And of course, you guys look forward to the next episode of The Breakdown. We'll be here every Tuesday live on YouTube and taking your comments as we go into this off season with plenty up in the air and plenty to discuss. Until then.